The night Michael and Lucas changed their lives forever. The sky that night was a deep blue, dotted with the first stars, as if even the universe knew that something great was about to happen. The entire city seemed to pulse in tune with the energy of the most anticipated event of the year, Michael's last show. Fans from all corners of the world had gathered there, some camping out for days, just to ensure they would be part of this historic moment. Inside the stadium, a light and sound show was already taking shape. The stage, a monumental work of art, reflected the glow of the flashlights and cell phones that the audience held like small headlights. The stands were full of anxious faces, some smiling, others crying, but all with one thing in common: the expectation of witnessing something unforgettable. It was the end of a tour that had crossed continents and broken records, but for Michael, this night was much more than that. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was one of intense preparation, but Michael's heart was heavier than ever. Sitting in a corner of the dressing room, he breathed deeply, trying to absorb the magnitude of that moment. It wasn't just the end of a tour. He knew, silently, that this show represented the closing of a cycle in his life, something he had not yet verbalized even to his closest team. He watched his reflection in the mirror, his eyes slightly tired but full of emotion. He had given his all to his music, his art, his fans, but he knew there was a limit to how much he could carry. Still, that night, none of that mattered. There was something greater that drove him, a purpose he could barely describe, but that made him want to give his fans one final gift, something they would carry with them forever. As the minutes passed and the show approached, one of the assistants entered the dressing room with a stack of letters. It was an old custom for Michael to read some messages from fans before going on stage. For him, this was not just a tradition, but a ritual that connected him directly with the people who really mattered, those he sang to. One letter in particular caught his attention. It was simple, handwritten on plain paper, but with a handwriting that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He held the letter for a moment before opening it, not knowing that those words would change the course of that night. On stage, the lights began to go out. The crowd erupted in screams as the sound of drums resounded throughout the stadium, announcing Michael's entrance. He left the letter neatly folded in his pocket, promising himself that he would make the night not just a show, but an experience that would touch everyone's hearts. The entire stadium vibrated as Michael appeared on the raised platform like a beacon of light in the darkness. But even as he sang the first songs, his thoughts were still stuck on that letter and the story it carried. He knew there was something special in store for that night, something that went beyond the spectacle and the applause. He just didn't imagine that this something would come from such an unexpected and deep connection. Among the thousands of people in the stadium, there was a young man who didn't look like the others. Lucas, aged 16, held a letter tightly in his hands as his eyes shone with emotion. He wore a worn T-shirt from one of Michael's early tours, something he had inherited from his mother, a devoted fan who had passed on her love of music to him. Lucas wasn't just another fan. His life had been marked by challenges that many could not imagine. Diagnosed with a chronic illness at the age of 8, he had grown up surrounded by hospitals and painful treatments. But there was something that always made him smile: Michael's music. Each lyric seemed to speak directly to him, giving him strength in his most difficult moments and the courage to continue. The opportunity to be on that show was more than a gift. It was a miracle. His family, without many resources, had mobilized to buy the ticket. It was his uncle who helped him write the letter he now held, a letter where Lucas thanked Michael for being his light in times of darkness. As the show began, Lucas looked around, admiring the light show and sound that filled the air. But in his heart, he hoped for something more. He'd heard stories of how Michael would sometimes read letters sent in by fans before shows. Maybe, just maybe, your letter could have reached him." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment and whispered a silent prayer. He didn't want fame. He wanted nothing more than to personally thank the man who had changed his life. He didn't know that, behind the scenes, his letter had already begun to move Michael's heart. Backstage, as technicians fine-tuned the final details of the show, Michael sat in a quiet corner of his dressing room. He had a habit of reading some fan mail before going on stage. For him, it was a reminder of the impact his music had on people's lives, something that helped him reconnect with the purpose behind it all. Among several letters spread out on the table, one in particular caught his attention. It was simple, handwritten, with a slightly shaky handwriting but full of sincerity. The letter began with the words, "Michael, you've saved my life more times than I can count." He stopped. Something about that opening sentence grabbed him, as if he could feel the weight of emotions behind it. As he continued reading, his eyes began to shine. Lucas described how Michael's songs accompanied him during long days in hospital, how the lyrics made him feel that he was not alone in his battles. The young man explained that music, "Hold On," it was his personal anthem, and whenever he heard it, he gained strength to believe in better days. He ended by saying, "I don't know if you'll read this, but if you ever find out who I am, I want you to know that my gratitude is eternal." Michael took a deep breath, feeling a lump in his throat. Among so many letters, this one seemed different. He was silent for a moment, reflecting. Something told him that he needed to meet that young man. It was as if fate had placed that letter in his hands for a reason. Michael turned to his assistant and said firmly, "I want to find this boy. Find out where he is." The request was immediately passed on to the team, and they began looking for Lucas among the public. Meanwhile, Michael, with the letter still in hand, felt a new purpose blossom in his heart. That meeting needed to happen. In the busy hallways of the stadium, Michael's team began searching for Lucas among the crowd. The young man, sitting close to the stage, was absorbed in the show without imagining that his letter had been read. He sang along with the audience, holding his mother's T-shirt as if it were a talisman, when one of the security guards approached and asked, "Are you Lucas?" The boy widened his eyes, confused. Yes, did something happen?" he replied with a trembling voice. The security guard smiled slightly. "Michael wants to meet you. Come with me." The words seemed to echo in his mind. Lucas felt his heart race as he followed the security guard through the stadium corridors. He wondered if it was a dream, if he was about to wake up in his bed. At the same time, the letter he had written so much now weighed heavily in his pocket, as a reminder that this was real. Arriving backstage, Lucas stopped in front of a door decorated with a gold star and Michael's name. He took a deep breath, his hands sweaty and his thoughts racing. When the door opened, there he was, Michael sitting on a sofa, looking directly at the young man with a welcoming smile. "Are you Lucas?" asked Michael, standing up. Lucas barely managed to respond, just shook his head. His eyes filled with tears and he murmured, "It is me." Michael reached out to shake his hand, but when he saw the boy's emotion, he decided to hug him. It was a long and meaningful hug. Michael pulled away just enough to look into Lucas's eyes and said, "Your letter. You have no idea how much it touched me. Thank you for writing to me." Lucas, still in disbelief, took a deep breath and found the courage to speak. "I'm the one who needs to thank you. Your songs were my strength in so many difficult times." At that moment, they both realized that this meeting was more than a gesture. It was a deep connection between two souls, a meeting between someone who offered hope through music and someone who received it as a priceless gift. The dressing room, although simple, seemed to have been transformed into a sacred space at that moment. Lucas was sitting in front of Michael, still trying to believe that all of this was real. Michael, in turn, listened attentively to the young man's every word, as if nothing in the world was more important than that conversation. "I was 8 years old when I heard your music for the first time," Lucas began, his voice breaking. "I was in the hospital, and my mother put Hold On for me. Since that day, your voice has accompanied me through every difficult moment. You helped me not to give up." Michael leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the boy. "You know, Lucas, when I wrote this song, I was going through a very difficult time. Sometimes I wonder if the words I put out into the world actually get where they need to go. Today you showed me that yes." Lucas smiled, moved, and took something out of his pocket, Michael's old tour t-shirt, which he had kept as a treasure from his mother. "My mother said that one day I would find you. She was your biggest fan, but she passed away before being able to attend one of your shows." Michael picked up the shirt carefully, his fingers running through the fabric as if he were touching a relic. He felt the weight of Lucas's words, and for a moment he seemed to be processing everything. "Your mother would be very proud of you right now," Michael said, his voice low and full of emotion. "And I'm honored to know that music connected us, even at different moments in our lives." The conversation continued, and time seemed to freeze for both of them. Lucas told stories of his struggle with the disease, his victories and defeats, and how Michael's music helped him get through each day. In return, Michael spoke about his inspirations, his own challenges, and how he found strength in the fans who loved him. "You're a warrior, Lucas," Michael said, touching the boy's shoulder. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Lucas, with tears streaming down his face, replied, "I'm only strong because you showed that it's possible to be strong, even on the worst days." Both were silent for a moment, allowing the emotion of that encounter to speak louder than any words. In that small dressing room, between laughter and tears, Michael and Lucas connected in a way that neither of them would ever forget. As the conversation flowed, the sound of the eager crowd outside began to grow louder. Michael looked at the clock and realized that the time to return to the stage was approaching. He got up, but before leaving he turned to Lucas with a special sparkle in his eyes. "You know I can't let this date end here, right?" Michael said with a smile. Lucas looked at him confused, while Michael continued, "I have something special for you. Stay here. I promise you will never forget what's coming next." Lucas nodded, still not fully understanding what Michael intended, but fully trusting that unique moment. A few minutes later, Lucas was escorted to a special place near the stage, where he could see everything up close. His heart beat faster by the second as the show's lights dimmed and the audience began to scream in euphoria. Michael entered the stage, and the stadium erupted in applause and screams. He went through the set list masterfully, delivering his signature performance, but seemed to be holding back something special. Suddenly, the stage lights dimmed, and Michael grabbed the microphone. "Before we continue, I want to do something different tonight," he said, and his voice echoed in the packed stadium. "I want to dedicate a song to someone who reminded me why I do what I do. This song is for Lucas." The lights illuminated Lucas's face in the audience, and the surrounding audience began to applaud and look at him in awe. Michael started singing, "Hold On," but this time in a completely different way. The melody was softer, more intimate, as if each note was a direct conversation with Lucas. Lucas, unable to contain his tears, felt each word resonate in his soul. He held his mother's t-shirt against his chest as he listened to the music that had been the soundtrack of his life. On stage, Michael seemed equally emotional, putting all his energy and heart into the song. When the song ended, the audience gave a standing ovation. But for Lucas, that moment was more than applause. It was confirmation that the challenges he had faced, the struggles that had almost made him give up, now had even greater meaning. Michael looked at Lucas, one more time before returning to the original setlist. But that moment stuck with everyone. There, for Lucas, it was an unforgettable gift. For Michael, it was a powerful reminder of the impact music can have on someone's life. After the moving performance of Hold On, Michael returned to the dressing room for a few minutes while the band took a brief break from the show. Despite his energy on stage, those who knew him well knew he carried more than just the burden of touring. At that moment, sitting alone, he felt the impact of accumulated fatigue and the incessant pressures that came with fame. Michael held Lucas's letter, now folded neatly in his pocket. He wondered how many more lives he could have touched, and how many more he could achieve before his body and mind asked for final rest. Meeting Lucas had rekindled something in him, but it had also brought to the surface an internal conflict. He had given so much of himself to the world that at times he felt he had nothing left for himself. As he was reflecting, one of his assistants entered the dressing room. "Michael, are you okay? You still have a few songs to close the show." Michael smiled slightly and nodded. "Yes, I just need a minute." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The image of Lucas, holding that T-shirt with so much meaning, came back to his mind. That was why he kept going, even when the weight seemed unbearable. It wasn't about the applause or the records, but about the human connection that music provided. When he returned to the stage, the audience welcomed Michael with more enthusiasm than ever. He decided to give himself even more, to sing with all his heart, as if every note was a tribute to the young man who had touched his soul that night. The invisible challenge continued, but in that moment, Michael found strength where he least expected it, in the purity of a fan's love and the impact his words could have. He realized that although his struggles were real, his music was a powerful weapon to overcome any barrier, for himself and for others. The show was coming to an end, and Michael knew that this would be the last encore of his tour. He returned to the stage for the final applause, and the entire stadium seemed to vibrate with energy. Before singing the last song, he took the microphone and asked for silence. His voice echoed through the packed stadium, but his tone was soft, almost intimate. "Tonight was special in a way that I will never forget. I met someone who reminded me of the power that music has to connect us, to give us hope," he said, looking directly at Lucas in the audience. "Lucas, you gave me strength today, more than you know." The screen's camera focused on Lucas, who was teary-eyed, trying to process that surreal moment. The audience gave him a standing ovation, and Michael continued, "I want everyone here to remember something. You are not alone, even on the most difficult days. There is always something or someone to remind us why we keep going." For me, that person was Lucas tonight. Michael started his last song, a final goodbye, a song he rarely performed live. The melody was full of emotion, and his voice seemed charged with every memory, every connection he had made over the years. The entire stadium sang along, but for Lucas, it was as if Michael was singing just for him. At the end of the song, Michael looked at Lucas once again, waved discreetly, and with a sincere smile said to the audience, "Thank you for being part of my life." When the lights went out and the audience began to leave, Lucas remained in his seat for a few minutes, holding his mother's T-shirt and reliving every moment of the encounter. He knew that goodbye was not just the end of a show, but the beginning of something new in his life. As Lucas left the stadium, a message seemed to echo in his mind, coming from Michael himself. "You are stronger than you think. Never forget that." When he returned home that night, Lucas felt that something inside him had changed. The experience of meeting Michael, listening to his words, and being part of such a unique moment rekindled in him a desire to make a difference. He didn't want that meeting to be just a precious memory. I wanted to turn it into something bigger. Over the next few days, Lucas began sharing his story. He told friends, family, and even social media about the impact Michael and his music had on his life. The story quickly gained attention, touching the hearts of many people who also found strength in Michael's music. Messages of support began to arrive, some from people who, like Lucas, were facing challenges and found hope in Michael's lyrics. Inspired, Lucas decided to create a project in his community. Hold On, Voices of Hope. The project brought together young people facing health or emotional challenges, offering them a space to share their stories and find strength in each other. He also used music as a healing tool, organizing small performances where everyone could express their feelings through lyrics and melodies. Lucas always started each meeting by talking about the day he met Michael. He talked about how the artist made him feel seen, special, and how that moment inspired him to carry the message forward. If Michael found the strength to continue through the challenges, so can we, he said with confidence. His mother's T-shirt, now framed in his room, has become a symbol of the impact love and music can have on someone's life. Lucas knew his mother would be proud, just as Michael would be, to see that he not only received a message of hope, but also shared it with the world. Over the years, Michael's legacy has lived on, not just in his music, but in Lucas's actions and all the people he helped. For Lucas, that meeting was not just a gift. It was a call to be a source of light in the lives of others. We'll adjust to ensure each topic reaches enough words, creating a richer, more engaging experience. I will rewrite the next topic with more details and greater depth, expanding the descriptions and reflections. Let's continue with the 10th topic to adapt it to the desired format. Lucas could never forget the day he met Michael. It was more than a memory. It was a living flame inside him, something he carried with him in every choice he made, in every word he shared. When he was alone, he often mentally reviewed every moment of that encounter. Michael's warm embrace, the sincere look that conveyed understanding, and the music that echoed in the stadium, as if it were composed exclusively for him. Years had passed since that meeting, but Lucas felt that the connection between him and Michael was still alive. He had kept his mother's T-shirt and the letter he had written to Michael in a special box. Whenever I faced a moment of doubt or difficulty, I would open the box, hold the items carefully, and it was as if I could hear Michael's voice again, saying, "You are stronger than you think." Lucas not only lived this strength, but decided to share it. He went on to travel to schools, hospitals, and community events, sharing his story and the message of hope that Michael had planted in his heart. We all need something or someone to remind us of who we are on our worst days. For me, it was Michael, and I hope to be that for you today. On one of these occasions, in a school in a humble neighborhood, Lucas saw a boy sitting in the back row, head down, as if he was carrying the weight of the world. After his talk, the boy approached with hesitant steps and, in a low voice, said, "Do you think music can save a life?" Lucas looked at the boy, remembering himself years ago with the same question in his heart. He bent down, looked the boy in the eyes, and replied with conviction, "Not only can it save, it can completely transform." At that moment, Lucas felt that Michael's message had passed on to another generation. The legacy continued. He never failed to mention that meeting Michael was not only an honor, but a reminder that even in the face of the greatest challenges, we all have something special to offer the world. When Lucas returned home, he had a ritual. In the corner of his room, there was a painting with his mother's T-shirt, a photo of Michael on stage, and the letter that had changed everything. He looked at it and said, "Thank you, Michael. Your light lives on in everything I do." And so, The last meeting between Michael and Lucas was not just a milestone in their lives, but a symbol of something bigger. It was proof that a genuine connection has the power to transcend time and space, inspiring and healing in ways neither could ever imagine.